The next section is actually so complex that it kind of goes full circle all the way back around to being overly simple. It's so complex it has become simple. And that is Cisco Voice. Why do I say it's so complex that it has become simple? I say that because it is so complex to quote that Cisco has actually created a tool to help you quote it, and you can actually work through that tool while you're sitting with the customer without the customer seeing pricing or anything like that. And so today, as we talk about quoting voice, we're going to work through how to work with the Cisco quick pricing tool. So let me open a new tab here. And we're going to go to quickpricingtool.com. And here you can see on, sorry about that phone call. All right. So here in my quick pricing tool dashboard, which requires a login like everything Cisco, a CCO login, you can see the quotes that I'm currently working on. And they're here on a dashboard, so I can kind of work with them. But for the purposes of today, we're going to create a new quote, and very simply going to click create new quote. It's going to ask us what this quote is for. Now, I will tell you, you can actually create some cool stuff in here that's not just voice. But for now, we're definitely going to just do voice. If you want to come configure a bunch of Meraki stuff, this is a kind of a cool one to use. But for now, I'm just going to stick to the Business Edition 6000, which is the voice platform that we typically use, and go from there. So I'm going to click Business Edition 6000. It's going to ask what distributor we work with. In most cases, this is going to be Ingram Micro. And so we're going to click Ingram Micro. Then it's going to start us off. Now, what's awesome about this is there are dots, right? Once we get to each of these, there will be red dots and green dots. Red dots mean the thing is not ready to move forward because something's not configured all the way or correctly. And green dots mean everything is cool. So what's awesome about this tool is you basically are just adding things based off of a customer's requirements. Okay. So let's start where we begin. Yes, I meant to say that. Let's start at the beginning, which is to add profiles. And these are basically user profiles. It is effectively what type of user does the customer think they're going to need? Are they going to need just a phone? Do they need phone and a soft phone at their house? Do they need, if they're using Jabber here, do they want that Jabber to have call pop and click to dial, right? Do they want these things? Once you find that out, you'll kind of know where to go. So for now, I'm going to say add a telephony profile. And let's create a profile that we call, let's say, the receptionist, right? Because a lot of time receptionist phones are different than normal user phones. So we'll say receptionist phone. Okay. And then you're just going to start clicking buttons, right? Do they want voicemail? Well, yeah, they want voicemail. Do they want single number reach? Sure. Do they want contact center? Probably not. Do they want Cisco WebEx Teams and meetings? Probably not. Video, personal, multi-party plus? No. Things like that. So we'll leave this on with just voicemail and single number reach. Then we'll come over here to software. Okay. Do they want that full featured desktop Jabber? Sure. For the purposes of this, let's say they want full desktop. Okay. Do they just want to make calls from their, receive and make calls from their desktop? Then you might choose IP communicator. But you can choose whatever you want here. In this scenario, at a bare minimum, do Cisco Jabber for everyone. It's free, right? Don't ever select none. Select Cisco Jabber for everyone. And then down here on mobile, what do we want to give them access to? Again, I will say Cisco Jabber for everyone is free. Full-blown Cisco Jabber requires a license change. So let's say that for the purposes of this, This receptionist has a desk phone which has voicemail and single number reach. What is single number reach? Single number reach is when you call somebody's phone, it starts to dial or it starts to ring at their desk, and then we set up a profile so that after it rings at their desk, say 2 or 3 times, and they don't answer, it starts ringing on their cell phone. Okay? So that's single number reach. And then if you don't pick up the phone call on either of them, the phone call goes back to the desk phone and leaves voicemail there. So that's single number reach, and that's great. So voicemail, single number reach. This user, she really likes the power of the ability to click to call somebody. Right here, if I wanted to call Edward, I could just click one of these buttons. Things like that. So we definitely want that. And then we come down here and we're going to say, sure, this person wants Jabber, like fully loaded Jabber, even on their smartphone, right? This person might say, I'm mobile and sometimes I'm out running errands or doing things, but I still want full-blown Jabber on my phone, so that when somebody calls my office phone, it rings on my cell phone like I'm at the office, right? And I can make calls from my cell phone like I'm at the office. So let's say we're going to do that. And then we're going to come over here. And so this is the software feature and functionality of this receptionist phone. And then we're going to come over here to devices, and we'll choose to add a phone. Okay. Let's pick a nice phone for this receptionist. I will tell you that you could choose, pretty much any phone. However, our go-to is the Cisco 8851 phone for a receptionist user, and that's because this phone can have an optional sidecar attached to it, right? So it's very nice. Now, we could go as far as giving the receptionist a huge video phone, right? We could go as small as giving the receptionist just a courtesy phone, although that sounds very, very dangerous and not smart at all. So we definitely want to go somewhere in between, and we want to get the receptionist a nice phone, which is this 8851. So we're going to add that, and then you'll see there's a little button here that says options. Okay. So we want to come in here and we want to add this little sidecar for this receptionist. Should be pretty easy. Okay. If we wanted to wall mount the phone, we could put in a wall mount kit right here. If we wanted to add in an additional foot stand, we could put an additional foot stand here. Headsets, all those things could be put in. But for now, we just want to add in this little expansion module, and we'll click validate. And anytime you see validate, it means check to see if I'm doing everything okay, and if I am, excuse me. Sorry, another phone call. Apologize, I can't stop those. I have to rip my phone out. All right, so we now have this receptionist that we've loaded down with software, given a phone to. We could go as far as giving them an extra phone, right? Say that for some reason this receptionist also wanted to work from home, right? We could literally add an additional phone for that receptionist that we put at that receptionist's house, right? Or this is, I like to call this like the executive package, right? A lot of times a business owner is very, very intrigued by how very inexpensive it is from an incremental perspective to just then go put a phone in his house, right? But for now, I'll get rid of that extra phone, and we'll just say that this is the receptionist package. What's interesting is, I'm not sure if you noticed, but while I was clicking on options, this number kept clicking up, right? And so what it does is it tallies everything you've chosen for this type of user, puts it into what it's called devices, and assigns it a license type based off of that number of devices. Now this says 3, and you say, Brad, they've only got one phone. Well, the way this works is Cisco counts every handset and every application of full Jabber as one device. Okay, so there's one application of full Jabber, 2 applications of full Jabber, and 3 applications of full Jabber. And that is because this receptionist technically could run their entire phone system from their laptop screen. They could run it from this handset that we purchased, or they could run it from an application on their soft or on their smartphone. So that's 3 devices. You watch it change when I click from Jabber Full to Jabber for Everyone, which, like I said, was free. You see this device count went down, and so too, you have to trust me on this. The license changed. I'm promising you that this is a lower cost license than Cool Standard, and I'll put that back. So this actually is pronounced Cool, right? CUWL, Cisco Unified Workspace License, as opposed to these licenses, which are UCL, which is, I'm going to say, Unified Collaboration License, something like that. And UCL has got a bunch of different types. It starts from, I believe, Basic, then it goes to Essential, then it goes to Standard, Enhanced, and Enhanced Plus. I could be making up Standard. I think Standard is I'm making that up. So Essential, Basic, Enhanced, and Enhanced Plus. That's based off of a lot of different things, but you'll watch if I take this down a notch, it'll go down. You saw that plus disappear. An enhanced license is about the cheapest license you're going to have when your device has a display on it. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Let's put this back for now, though. We'll give it full jabber, and you see 3 devices, Cool Standard. We'll hit validate, and now we have this thing we call a receptionist phone. Okay, you'll see that I have no users assigned to it yet, but I do have a receptionist phone. You'll also see that Profiles has turned green, and the next one turns red. Profiles has turned green because now that I have at least one profile in here, I can start to build out my bill of materials. But one profile is not going to work. So let's add some more profiles. And conveniently for everybody, you don't have to start from scratch. Okay, I built a receptionist phone, but there are other receptionist phones, and they've already been created and added as a template here in the quick pricing tool. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this receptionist phone and grab phones from the profile, right? So here at Splendid, we've got a few different types of phones we like working with that work for us. And we have named them different things, right? In terms of normal user, base user, reception user, etc. So for now, I'm going to say, yeah, this proposal is definitely going to have some basic users in it. Then I'm going to say we're definitely going to have some reception users. I'm going to say the boss man's going to want something. So we're going to have an advanced user all the way down to conference phones, right? So we definitely are going to have some conference room phones. They told me they've got a break room. So we'll put a common area phone in the break room because we don't need to spend a bunch of money on a phone in a break room, right? And then finally, we are going to have some fax machines. So I'm going to go ahead and throw fax/analog in there. Okay. And then for just giggles, let's throw in the video room kit that we have built out. Okay. So you can see all those templates that we've created. They're all now in this profiles have already been added. We don't see any users, but now we're just basically going to be able to start adding those users to various sites. So for the purposes of this example, let's move forward. You can either click next here, or you can just kind of click around here. You can always navigate like I could skip to services and licensing, server and licensing if I wanted to, but I don't want to. So for now, I'm just going to click sites, and you can see that this has a bunch of sub menus, and there's some work to be done here. So basically what you always want to do is you want to start where the red dot is, and let it kind of guide you. Okay. So in this case, we see that sites is not finished yet. And that is because users per profile are not finished yet. And that's because while we have a bunch of profiles, we don't have any quantity assigned to them. So right now there's nothing there, even though there could be something. We haven't said there's 10 normal users, right? What's cool is this allows you to be so advanced that you can actually create multiple sites. Okay. So let's say this customer has a headquarters, right here in Dallas, and then we're going to add a site, and then we're going to call this a branch office in Austin. Austin, and a branch office in Houston. Okay. So now I've created 3 sites, and each of those sites is just waiting to know how many users they're going to have, right? So let's say here at the headquarters, we've got where all of our C-level staff exists, right? So let's say there are 10 advanced users here because they're C-level staff, okay? You'll notice that immediately headquarters turns green because I have added something to the profiles, okay? That doesn't mean you're done. That just means you could be done if you wanted to, and that's where green comes in. You'll also notice that down here, server and licenses lit up red. That's because now that I have users, I need to verify the licensing, and we'll get to that. So here, let's just finish filling this out. At the headquarters, let's say I have 10 advanced users. Let's say I have 55 normal users. Let's say there are 3 break rooms, 2 small conference room phones, 2 fax machines. Let's say there's 1 receptionist, and let's say there's 1 larger conference room that we want to put the video unit in, and we'll do 1, right? You'll notice that as I'm typing that out, stuff is getting filled in over here. Okay, certain things have expansion boxes next to them, right? So we'll you can kind of blow those up and go from there. Some things have a lot of different small pieces that go into them. But realistically, you can just kind of power through this. And this is where you have a real conversation with your client, right? How many basic users, how many advanced users, right? So let's say at the Austin branch office, let's say that there's 1 branch manager. There are 6 normal employees. They don't have any common area phones. They have 1 conference room. They have 1 fax machine, and they don't actually have any receptionists. Okay, so that site, you can see it turned green when I started adding profiles. And then finally in Houston, let's say it's slightly bigger. It's got that 1 branch manager. Let's say it's got a dozen normal employees. It's got 1 break room. It's got a conference room, but they really would prefer to have a video unit so they can talk to headquarters. And then they have a receptionist and a fax machine. Okay. So now I've built out all 3 of my sites. It's literally that easy. Once the profiles are built and you know what makes up each profile, all you've got to do is then come in and talk to your end user and say, okay, how many of this type of person, how many of this type of person, etc. And it builds the bill of materials for you. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we're going to click next this time because I want to show you how it moves for you if you click next. So we're going to click next, and it's going to take us to gateway selection. Okay. By default, I'm actually surprised this is not red yet. By default, there needs to be a gateway, and I will tell you that it will probably freak out if you don't choose a gateway. But I actually know what will make this turn red. So I'll show you what will make it turn red. So the first thing we want to do is, how is this gateway going to connect to the outside world, right? To the PSTN, to the public switched telephone network, right? There are, as you can see, 4 different options. Some of these are more viable than others. I will tell you, BRI we have not put in literally forever. FXO is what they call analog lines, right? So when you hear somebody say we have 5 lines coming into this building, that's FXO ports. That is old school, man. We certainly wouldn't want to be selling somebody a new phone system and having them use old school phone service, right? So today, we typically either put in a phone system using PRI or SIP trunks. Okay, what's the difference? PRI is a little bit older technology, but it's very tried and true. It's a workhorse, right? Think of a PRI as a voice T1 line. Okay, a T1 line, everybody is familiar with hearing that term from 20 years ago, kind of thing, because back in the day it used to mean a lot of bandwidth, and it was 1.5 meg, and that used to be huge. Well, they're still around today, and a PRI is a voice T1. A PRI can do roughly 23 calls to the outside world. We're going to call those channels, okay? And that's because when you do math on the encryption, every phone call uses up X amount of kilobits of bandwidth, and 23 times that number multiplies out to about 1.5 meg. And that's why it's called a voice T1, because it actually is a T1 line. It's just utilized for voice. So it's very tried and true, although it is slightly expensive. And if you don't need 23 lines, that's 23 calls to the outside world at one time. That's a lot. You probably don't need that. Even up to 100 phones probably don't need 23 channels to the outside world. So having to buy a full PRI could be slightly more expensive. The new hotness, as it were, are SIP trunks. SIP trunks are basically you buy them by the channel. So you remember I said this is 23 channels, and a channel is a call to the outside world. So this is how many channels, how many calls. So at the end of the day, the number of channels you want, whether it's PRI or SIP, is the determining factor. Unfortunately, PRI just pigeonholes you into a little bit more rigid form factor, right? So with SIP, let's say they've got, what did they have? They had 50 something, say 65 phones, maybe 100 phones total. Let's say that means they think they only need 20 SIP channels total. And this will be for the entire organization. So keep that in mind. Or you could go with one PRI, right? Something like that, right? This is purely the number of channels. This is the number of PRIs, and that translates to 23 channels per. So in either case, you choose how this gateway is going to access the public switched telephone network, the PSTN, and you fill in the quantity that is needed to do so. Very, very, pretty basic. Then kind of just continuing down the list, you're going to see, is the router required for WAN/internet? Now, basically what this is saying is we can oversize this router to also make it your data router. If you remember from the route switch section, we talked about how you could turn on additional services and do things like that. Also, if you remember from the route switch section, you remember me talking about how doing that is an exponential cost instead of a linear cost. So, sorry, my phone rang again. I don't honestly remember where I was. I believe it was somewhere around the router. So you'll recall me saying that you can oversize a router so it does extra work, but it is an exponential price increase instead of a linear price increase. So we always recommend that the voice gateway be its own device, separate from the data gateway. However, if you wanted to, you could make this. You could make this a redundant data voice router. However, in most cases, we're going to leave this at 0. And then finally, survivable remote site telephony, that's SRST, basically means if the server that controls the phone system goes down or is otherwise unreachable, do you want this box to take over for call control, right? That's a nice feature for redundancy. It's a lot more important for branch offices, right? So Austin and Houston probably want this because it means that if they lose connectivity to the headquarters, their phone system can keep working. Since the server sits probably 2 feet from where this box is, you need to decide whether or not you really want that service here at the headquarters. Depending on how important voice traffic is for your business, you may or may not want it. For us, we will go ahead and choose yes. So the number of phones to be supported in SRST mode is 73. So we'll just go ahead and type that in. And then we'll go ahead and click calculate. Now it's going to pick out the least cost version to support what we need this to support, right? So this will support 20 SIP trunks and 73 phones in SRST mode. It shows an ISR 4331 voice, and you can see that that's $13,000 list. It comes with a bunch of licensing and stuff that you'll have to pay attention to. So keep that in mind. One final note is over here, when you look at all these licenses, you're going to see FXS, and that's priority placement. Now, what does this mean? FXS, FXO. Real quick, foreign exchange station, foreign exchange office. Okay, so office points back to the home office. That would be the telephone provider's home office. So you can think of FXO as pointing to the outside world. FXS points to the station or the device, and you can think of that as inside world. So FXS is inside, FXO is outside. What this is asking is, how do we want our FXS devices working? FXS is, in this case, typically an analog phone, like an old school telephone we want to enable on this phone system, or primarily it's a fax machine. Okay, you'll remember that we did put some fax machines here, so this is what this is asking. Typically in our scenario, we don't like doing FXS off of FXS cards in the gateway. We like to choose external only, and that's going to give us a little box called an ATA. Okay. Once we click that, you'll see if you make any changes to this, it'll make you recalculate the gateway. So I don't expect a lot of changes, but now that I made that change, I'm going to go ahead and click calculate, do it again. And again, it popped up with a 4331 ISR, but this time it also came with an ATA 190. Now you'll notice that the price went down, right? That was $13,000. This is now $12,500 plus $350 is cheaper. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we do it. There are others, but this is one of the reasons. So you'll notice that after you click calculate, this is turned to green, and you should be good to go. Now what you want to do is basically do this with each location. You don't technically have to do this with branch offices, okay? The branch offices are not required to have a gateway to connect them to the public telephone network because all the voice traffic could route out of the headquarters. Now, we don't necessarily care for that because if the phone system goes down at the headquarters here in Dallas, Austin and Houston typically want to continue to be able to make calls without having that connection still present. So there's a number of things that could happen here in Dallas. We don't want that to affect Austin or Houston. So we typically want to put in a gateway. The second thing is 911 responds a lot better if the phone number originates from the physical address that the call's coming from, right? And even though we can do some things with some licensing so that the address is presented correctly, we definitely don't want a call to route out of Austin through the headquarters in Dallas and accidentally register as being in Dallas. That could waste precious time and could cost somebody, well, their life probably, right? So we don't want to do that. So that's a second reason why we always like to put in a little branch office a little branch office gateway. However, it is typically limited functionality. So if you'll remember this FXO that I talked about being kind of old school analog telephone lines, we actually want to take advantage of that in the branch office, and we just really want the router to be able to handle one of those, right? Why? We really only want to be able to use this gateway when the main phone system is down or when we're calling 911. In both cases, that just uses up one line. We have a dedicated line for that. The customer can pay just, $40 a month or something very simple and move on down the road, right? So in that scenario, we might use one FXO port. So I'm going to go ahead and follow this all the way down again. Again, not choosing anything besides this one type of service. It's very, very rare to choose two different types of service up here, although sometimes I guess it happens. It's very rare. Again, we don't want redundancy in a data capacity because that typically increases the price. I do want it to be survivable remote site. Remembering there are only 9 phones here, it's recommending 9 licenses. We'll go ahead with that. And then finally, external only, just like before, we'll go ahead and choose ATA voice gateway, and then we'll click calculate. This is going to come out with a much smaller gateway, and this comes out with the ISR 4321. Up to 50 phones, and you can see this is half the price of the gateway in Dallas, right? So it's actually significantly less than half the price. So that's good. We go down to Houston, do the same thing. Let's say that the Houston's office is a little bit bigger, and they want some of their own SIP trunks to come through their data circuit. So we say, okay, we'll give you 5 SIP trunks. Or they say, 4 SIP trunks. And again, following down the path, no redundancy or no data service. And we want these phones to be configured for SRST. Again, we click calculate. Sorry, let me change that to an external gateway or an external ATA. Click calculate. You see that this again comes up with a 4321, right? It's pretty similar regardless of what you do. It's just going to change the internal config, and you can see that this is 5597 as opposed to the one in Office, which is 5803, right? So the one in Austin is actually a little bit more expensive, with a little bit less capability. Now the difference here is the one in Houston is going to have a bigger monthly bill from the service provider, and that's fine if that's what Houston wants to do. So just keep that in mind. That's set up. So you can see these have all turned green. Gateway is green. So we now want to continue on to the next red dot. Now this technically will allow us to spec out wireless and switching. So by all means, if you already know what you're going to do from a wireless and switching perspective, and you just want to put some part numbers in here, this is actually helpful for putting something into the Cisco deal registration tool. But typically, I'm not going to use this to spec out a phone system. So we're going to skip wireless and switching. We'll hit the next thing just to see what they are. And these are different applications, okay? So we're going to run through these just to see if we want any of them. And Cisco Attendant Console, well, this is a very big piece of software that allows you to drag and drop names to transfer and do some crazy stuff. How big is it? Well, I will tell you that an advanced license for one user costs $4,000. Okay, let me say that again. This is a piece of software that exists on one person's computer. It costs $4,000. If you're in a place that experiences high call traffic and the ability for the receptionist to move calls around very, very quickly is important, that might come into play. Typically, I would say it is not necessary. Okay. Contact center. If you're watching this video, then you are learning how to use the Cisco QPT, which means you should not be messing around with contact center licensing. And none of the profiles we created had contact center licensing in it anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. That's fine. Do we want overhead paging? Overhead paging comes by default for free in the system, and we can choose to install it or not. So we'll choose basic overhead paging. Basic overhead paging is great for businesses because it allows you to page to up to 50 phones at a time. If you're doing it as a school, you definitely have to go for the enhanced because you might be paging way more than 50 phones at a time. But for basic business, overhead paging, the free version is pretty cool, right? And it's free, right? Cisco Emergency Responder, you heard me talk about how you could technically get licensing so that when you called from the Houston office through the Dallas office to 911, it would still pass along the data to show 911 that you were in Houston, okay? I will say that if your branch office is in another city, you should definitely go with the FXO route, simply to be safe. However, if you're selling to a school district or a place where just the actual physical address is important, building address, things like that, you could absolutely go with Cisco Emergency Responder. Just a word of warning for what it costs. If I were to put 100 Cisco Emergency Responder licenses in there, it's $2,600. It's not that bad, but it does take, a few extra hours of labor. So I would definitely double that cost to account for the labor, and go from there. It's not something we typically do, although we're starting to do it more, so you may run into it. Cisco WebEx Teams is for basically WebEx, I guess. There's no simpler way to state that. This gives them licenses to use WebEx. Very cool, but pretty pricey. None of the profiles that we created had the WebEx licensing, so we don't actually need it. And then video endpoints. I thought that I had sized an SX10, but this is not where that sizes up. So we don't have to worry about this here. This would be for full-blown telepresence endpoints. Ugh, excuse me for the yawn. But we don't need that here. So basically, if it's grayed out, based off of the choices you made up here, you don't really have to worry about it. And prime collaboration assurance and analytics software we don't typically put in, so I would ignore that. Going to Solutions Plus, there are not a whole lot of things in here worth talking about, but maybe one thing we do, a magical Stone Fax. Or Stone Voice, yeah, Stone Fax. This is for faxing to email. Okay, it's pretty cool. It is pretty expensive though, right? So 2 channels is $4,000. So don't forget that you're playing with somebody else's money here. But I would say fax to email. That's where you would click that. The rest of this is kind of non-standard. Now I will say Atlas Sound, these are the speakers that we use. I wouldn't typically put these in here. I would grab the Mac pricing out of ConnectWise, because each of these requires a data cable and requires labor and requires a bunch of stuff that we don't typically need, or we're not typically going to be able to put in here. And quite frankly, this is made by a company called Atlas. It's not Cisco product, so we don't need to buy it off the Cisco catalog, although we technically could if we needed to, I guess. But you can spec some IP speakers here if you want. So Solutions Plus is not typically something we use, but we do every now and then, so just keep that in mind. Finally, and I do mean finally, because the rest of this is kind of non-obligatory, but server and licensing. So when we click on this, it's the very last thing we're going to do. When the first time you click on it, you're gonna see a question that says, when users are outside of the company, do they need to use their Jabber without VPN? Right. This is a nicety that a lot of times we would say no is not necessary, but more and more today we are using it. It basically will put in licensing for what's called Cisco Expressway. Cisco Expressway enables users to connect with their cell phones or actually their laptops as well, and use their Jabber application here, right, for chat, without having to be connected to their office network. Okay, why is that important? That's important because sometimes people go home and work and they don't want to do a VPN. A lot of times people use cloud-based services these days, so VPN connections back to the office are not necessarily standard anymore. And sometimes customers are looking for a way to enable their clients remotely without requiring them to build a VPN tunnel. That's just a question that basically, once this pops up, you need to ask the customer, hey, do you want your users to be able to use this solution without having to VPN to the office? Okay, I'll show you what that changes. If you look here, you can see that the bill of materials right now for the server is it's a BE6M, that stands for medium density, and it's an M5. It's $13,764. If I change this to yes, it's basically going to add a block of it's basically an application block, which is a visual indicator for the amount of resources we're using on the server. So when I check this box and I click close, I think it's going to add it, and let's see what it does. So you can see those. So did you see this get added just now? Expressway. These are 2 big blocks, and that actually kicked it up from a 6M medium density server to a 6H high density server, and it made it $23,000 instead of $13,000. Okay. Now conveniently, that box is right here. So if I check it again, we can see it all change, and this becomes $13,000 again. And there's actually room to grow. The problem is, the reason it went up $10,000 is we basically used up blocks 8 and 9 and 10, and then we used up an 11th block. So honestly, if I was able to remove, say, this paging, and they said they didn't want paging, we could still keep this in a BE6M, even if they wanted to use Expressway. So we're right on the edge. Let's talk through visually what this stuff means. CUCM is Cisco Unified Communications Manager. That is basically what we call call control. This is the thing that makes phones work. This is the thing that lets you dial extension 1234 and makes another phone ring. Okay, it has to happen. It exists. It is mandatory. Unity Connection is their name for their voicemail system. Okay, their voicemail server, for lack of a better word. And it does not necessarily grow in size. You either have it or you don't. And the reality is, most people are going to have at least one phone with voicemail. So this is probably also always going to be there, and it's going to be mandatory. Okay. Cisco Prime Collaboration Provisioning is a VM that goes on the server that is used to actually configure all of this. So it is not necessarily mandatory, but I don't know if that gets rid of it. Yeah, so if I don't check automatic, I can get rid of things that are not mandatory. Okay, so I can definitely get rid of paging or Prime Collaboration. Let me put this back real quick just so I don't screw anything up, and then we're gonna actually mess around with it so you can see what it does. So it's not mandatory, but it would be nice for the users because it's helpful after the fact for configuring the system. Instant Messenger and Presence is another one that's semi-mandatory. This is the thing that shows whether or not people are present, right? So right here, you can see that Ramon is green. He is available. Whereas Eric McAndrews is gray. He is offline completely. Okay. You can see that Josh Heron is busy. And you can see, let's see. You can't see my phone. Let me bring up my dashboard. So you can see this shows that I'm in a meeting, and that's because my Outlook calendar right now shows me to be in a meeting because I have a block of time dedicated to recording this video. So I am in presence actually connects to your Outlook server as well. And when you're in a meeting, it actually shows you to be in a meeting or away, do not disturb, etc. So the IM&P block is also pretty mandatory just to get it to do some of the more basic advanced functions. I know I just said the words basic advanced functions, but there they are. So let me show you what we could do here. I took off automatic configuration and put that expressway back in, right? You see that takes it over into 11. Well, what if we didn't want to enable paging? Right? Okay. So the following applications are required by the configuration, but not installed on these servers. If we put that back, it'll make me put it all back in. But what's interesting is you can't talk your way out of the sizing as long as you have everything turned on. So you will basically have to have it or not, and just keep that in mind. Then the only other box is whether or not you want some level of redundancy. Redundancy is nice. It adds a second server on the off chance that the first server dies. That's great. You could make every application redundant. It does double the price. I mean, it's a second server with a second set of software. You just have to deal with that. The other thing you could do is just make the power supply redundant, right? Power supply is one of the most common things to fail on a server. And so if you added a second power supply, that would give you a little bit of redundancy without a whole lot of costs. So there's some options there from a redundancy perspective, and you just need to know what to check and what not to check. But you can see that once I clicked on it at all, it turned green because it spec'd out my server. It spec'd out, this is actually, this $25,000, which I haven't addressed yet. This is all the licensing necessary to run everything. Okay, it's $25,000 worth of licensing. It's a lot of licensing, but keep in mind that we typically are going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 to 60% off. So this is really only about $10,000 worth of licensing, and that may still sound very expensive, but the phone system that I'm building out is not cheap, and so you definitely need to keep that in mind. Once we see the full price, you'll understand why, $25,000 isn't that big of a deal. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? And then finally, if I choose licensing here, you can see that this is basically chosen the best case scenario for my licensing, right? Okay, so remember those advanced users, right? You can see them here. This said, and so when I say best case scenario, I mean cheapest, basically, right? the lowest cost option necessary in order to enable this stuff, right? So you can see these advanced users. It was determined that, hold on one second, let me pause that. These advanced users, 12 of them, they are determined to be cool standard licensing. So you can see that here. Whereas the basic users, you can see that most of these have different versions. Now you'll see redundancies here. So you'll see you'll see the UCL enhanced, and you'll see that that's repeated in the base user, but also in the conference room user. And that's simply because it wants to keep these users broken out, but it also, some users might, for different reasons, arrive at the same license type. So you'll see these. So you have UCL enhanced, UCL essential, UCL enhanced, UCL essential, UCL enhanced plus. Okay. Why did it need UCL Enhanced Plus but still put it over here in Cool? I will show you here in a second. Actually, I'll show you now. If we scroll down, we're going to find a part number that's STR. Nope, not that one. There's another one that actually has a price associated with it. There you go. Start. So BE6K Starter Pack, Unified Workspace License 35. This is 35... these are the first 35 licenses for this phone system, and they're at a drastically reduced cost. How drastic? Well, you heard me say they're the highest end license. You get 35 of them for $1,000. Okay. Whereas if I go down here and right underneath it, I'm going to show you the lowest type of license, which is a BE6K Essential license. Okay. These are $40 a piece. Okay. So 35 of these would be $1,200. Okay. So how drastic a difference? Very, very drastic. The enhanced license, which is a step up, they're $210 a piece. So 35 of those would be $7,000. The enhanced plus license, which I don't see. Oh, that's why, because there is no enhanced plus license because I didn't need it. So you can see that this is a really good deal. What the system is basically going to do is it's going to pick the highest type of license that you need, and it's going to buy a starter pack of that type. This is a really, really good deal. It is always a great deal, and that's why it's always good to have like at least one cool user, because it gets them that cool starter pack of licenses, which is, like I said, it's a very, very good deal. And so that's why you'll see that even though these say they only need enhanced plus licensing, they come over here under cool. Now, the reality is, what we're probably going to see is these are 35 licenses, 14 of them are used. That means that 21 are free. We'll go down to the next type of license. We'll see UCL enhanced. There's 73 here. There are 3 there. That's 76. But I had 21 cool licenses left over. So if I'm doing math correctly, I should have 76 minus 21 left over here. And that should mean that I have 55 enhanced licenses here somewhere. And when I look there, there's my 55 enhanced licenses. Okay. So basically what it does is it buys the big pack of the great licenses at the awesome price, and then it uses all of those licenses, and then it buys the cheaper licenses on a one-for-one basis as it needs it. Okay. So that's licensing. It is automatic. Now you can click off automatic and go to customize, and you can move some of these licenses over, right? You can say, hey, look, I don't care what they said in terms of, this is enhanced licensing only. I want to just give them all cool licensing. You can absolutely do that. I would suggest against it. For some reason, services doesn't light up, but you do need to click on services because there's a lot of things that need to have a choice made. There's $21,000 worth of services here at list price. There's not a lot of discount on services, so this is a lot of money that's going to flow directly to your customer. You need to make a decision. Kind of starting top left, going to bottom right. All your part numbers are here, and some filters are here. But where you really want to play with is how many years of services do you want on the phone system to begin with? A very popular number is 3 years. Another very popular number is 1 year. Okay. In either case, you should make your services here match your Swiss here. Real quick, let's talk about that. This is SmartNet. Okay. This is warranty service on hardware. Okay. This is Swiss, which is warranty service on software. Okay. So SW for software. So it is relatively linear. You can see that that's $7,100. If I take it up to 3 years, and 3 years, you can see it goes up to $21,000, and that's roughly 3 times as much. So it's not like there's a lot of savings for buying in bulk up front. Just keep that in mind. Couple things real quick. Let's go ahead and just for the sake of argument, let's take it down to 1 and 1. And then we need to go through this list and make some choices. So you have to buy Swiss. You cannot not buy Swiss on licensing. Licensing, you have to buy the first year of Swiss. It's mandatory. You do not have to buy SmartNet on any of the hardware. Okay, so let's talk about the splendid pricing strategy when it comes to hardware. First of all, critical hardware components we feel need to be covered not only under SmartNet, but under very good SmartNet, simply because that SmartNet only covers the box and it's very, very inexpensive. How inexpensive is it? Well, the server that runs the entire phone system, okay, if we covered it under 24 hours a day, 7 days a week SmartNet with a 4-hour response time. So just let me make sure this is clear. 24 by 7 by 4 means if something breaks at 11 p.m. on Saturday night, there will be a replacement to that customer by 3 a.m. Sunday morning. Okay, that is a super critical level of service. That's amazing, right? Something that stellar and that critical for a device that's important is right here. Okay, it's $582 list price for 1 year. The customer's probably going to end up paying $500. $500 to cover this for 1 year. For 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a 4-hour response time. That's pretty amazing. If I were to take it down to just 8 by 5 by next business day, so that's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you get a replacement within the next business day. Let's see what that changes to. It only went down to $364. The customer will pay about $300. So for $200 delta, you could go from only covering your phone system server over the weekday or over the work week to covering that bad boy literally all day, every day, and getting a response back within 4 hours or getting new gear within 4 hours. So we feel like things like that are critical. And since so much of the cost is removed to the software support, we always very much like to do 24 by 7 by 4 support on the hardware for the phone system, simply because they're very critical components. And from a pricing and support strategy, we think it's appropriate. Now, as we scroll down here, some of these that are marked red, right, are basically, again, red means you need to make a choice. So purple here is mandatory, right? It's on Swiss. You have no choice. It's mandatory. Okay. Blank means you've made a choice. Okay. Red means you have not made a choice, right? So on the fax adapters, right, the ATAs, we don't, and quite frankly, the phones as well, we don't carry SmartNet. Why don't we do that? We don't do that because they're $8 a piece a year. Now that sounds like a lot, or that doesn't sound like a lot, but this organization is going to have roughly 100 phones, and that means that every year they could break 2 phones and replace 2 phones for the same price as carrying SmartNet on everything. Quite frankly, Cisco makes a good product, right? We're not concerned about phones breaking, and so the safe money is to buy a spare phone, and if it breaks, buy a new one to replace the spare and put the spare out in its place, and you'll save money. So unfortunately, that typically means that we don't have SmartNet on phone devices. Now, you'll see that this turned yellow. Yellow is one of my favorite colors on this because it means, well, technically you can do it, but we don't suggest it. Okay. And so that's just fun, right? If you change it to 8 by 5 by next business day, you'll see it. It's like, hey, look, no warning light. You're doing a good thing. Well, we're going to stay with yellow. Okay. And we'll keep going. And again, this is a fax machine, so we'll leave that without support. We don't really care to spend the money. We'll fix it if it breaks. These are the voice gateways. They're very important. They're very expensive. We're definitely going to leave them on. Okay. Another fax machine. And this will be broken up by site, which is why you see 3 line items for fax machines, because there were fax machines at each site. We're not going to see another line item for fax machines, and we're certainly not going to see 100 line items for phones. It's just going to cover all models of the phones, but at each site. So we will see multiple lines of this 8851. Again, the strategy here is pretty basic. We don't care to cover phones with a whole lot of SmartNet. I will say that the SX10 unit is not an inexpensive unit. If it does break, it is right here, $563 a year. I'd take it or leave it. I definitely wouldn't do 24x7x4. I'd probably do something like 8x5. Okay. Again, that goes down by half, but this is a non-critical component, so we don't necessarily know that we really care. Okay. Courtesy phone, let's not cover it. Basic phone, no coverage. Video or color phone, no coverage. Conference room phone, no coverage. Basic phone, color phone. Room kit, again, let's go back to 8x5. Did I break it? Oh, tell me I didn't break it. Sorry, that took a second for it to resolve. I don't know why. It really freaked out. It was very upset that my phone reminded me of something on my calendar. So it just kind of lost its mind. I don't know. So 8x5, and then again, we're just going to continue not covering the individual phones simply because from a fiscal perspective, we don't feel like it makes just a whole lot of sense. And you'll see that money falling off, right? So I'll be interested here in a little bit to rewind the footage and see how much money comes off by not covering the phones. It will make sense to you why, hey, the smart money is to just buy a few spare phones or 1 or 2 spare phones. And if a phone dies, swap out the phone and buy a new phone. It's cheaper in the long run. So this is now completely worked out, right? We went from the top to the bottom. We checked everything. Things that were mandatory, we couldn't change. Things that weren't mandatory, we made the decision whether or not it was important enough to cover it under SmartNet. Yeah, so that's great, right? We're very happy. So we could keep going. Non-Cisco services. This is just basically an empty field, right, for us to add stuff. This we don't use. We really don't use this. And then client information. This is, it used to be mandatory. Maybe it's not mandatory anymore. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to, what was my test company called? Hold on. Hold, please. Oh, please don't think less of me. I apparently had something that was due yesterday that is red. You should always get the red out. That's not good. So I want to stop teaching the thing I'm teaching and get the red out. It's always very important to get the red out no matter what. I will set a follow-up for them on the 12th. And that's why you should get the red out, because it doesn't take that long to do it as long as you're upkeeping each and every one, right? It's just super important, okay? Let's see here. So what did my test company? My test company was called ABC Test Company. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say ABC Test Company Voice, right? You don't have to fill out the rest of this. This would be if you wanted to kind of turn over a quote to them, but realistically, meh, you don't have to fill out the rest of it. This is just a good name to put in here so that we don't forget the name later on. And then finally, you can see everything's green, so you can click the summary button. And we will pause while we wait for it to, there we go, update. And you can see that you have built out a $107,000 bill of materials. Okay. So when I say the licensing is not much, it is less than 25%. It's about 23%. It's a hefty chunk, don't get me wrong. But in the grand scheme of things, it's $107,000. We will probably end up being quoted $45,000 for it or so. End up charging the customer $55,000 to $60,000 of it for it. And so That's just kind of that. Now, this is already saved. So if I click, don't click X. Okay, X is the equivalent of don't save. Checkbox is the equivalent of save. So when I click it, it's going to save it. It's actually going to boot me out of here. Don't fear though, it's going to show up right here on your dashboard, right? What's cool is you got the ability to duplicate this quote if you ever need to do a revision of it, and that's great. You can see right here, I did 2 revisions for Dillard Associates, one on 6/4 and one on 6/24, slightly different prices, but I'm sure the bill of materials is different. So give this a double click, let it load back up. Okay, it'll start from the beginning again. I would be very careful to touch any of this. When you touch stuff, it kind of makes you review a lot of other stuff over again. I'm going to come down here to summary though, and I'm going to finish up the demo by showing you the last really cool thing that this does, and it really is very cool. This is one of the reasons why you want to use the QBT. And that is this little export button, which they went ahead and put a green dot next to, just to let you know it's safe to export. That's very important because if it was red, you would know it was not. So I'm going to click export. There are some really cool things you can export to. Okay. You can print to Excel to an actual proposal straight for the customer. Don't use this. That's not what this is for us anyway, because you haven't set any discounting. Unless you're a better salesman than me, if you can take a phone system that costs us $45,000 and sell it to the customer for $107,000, then you come see me. You have a job here for life, and that's great. But since we didn't set any of the discount levels here, we can't really print this to a proposal, so I would be careful about doing that. But you can export it to Excel. This is a great option for adding into our spreadsheet. Okay. We're in America, so this is American money. But if you chose use other currency, you could actually choose some different type of money. Don't know why you would, but you could. And then you want the bill of materials. You could have that bill of materials broken out by site. I typically like to check this box because it will show the Houston site, the Austin site, the Dallas site, and a lot of people want to see that level of granularity. Okay, so when I click export, you can see that my spreadsheet is down here. Let's assume that I went and put it in my project folder like a good account manager. But for now, I want to show you what it prints out. This is really, really great, guys. I cannot stress enough how cool this is. So you see the site right here, right? This is where the gear is going to sit. Okay. The server is in this bill of materials, as is all of the licensing. And that's because all that stuff sits on the server. Okay. Then you'll see branch office Austin, branch office Houston, things like that. Going over description. What a great thing to just copy and paste into your Excel spreadsheet, right? If the description's good enough and professional enough for Cisco, then doggone it, it ought to be good enough and professional enough for us. Part numbers. What a great thing to paste into the part number column of your spreadsheet. I would say if it's good enough for Cisco, it's good enough for us, but quite frankly, these are the actual part numbers, and so it's just factually good enough, okay? Sale price per unit, right? Sale PR per unit, right? Because you didn't monkey around with discounts, this is MSRP. Okay, what a great column to copy and paste into the list price column of your spreadsheet. I mean, y'all are following me, right? This gives you literally everything you need to transfer this to our quoting spreadsheet and apply our discounts the way we need to. Okay. Quantities, don't make me say it again. Copy and paste this into the quantity column and you're good to go. The rest of this is kind of redundant, so you can ignore it. But this is definitely, these first 5 or 6 columns are amazing. Use them, copy and paste. Let all the hard work you've already done work for you, and put that into our Excel spreadsheet. And then, of course, always save this in case you ever need to refer back to it. Save it in the project spreadsheet. The other cool file that I think is great is actually there's several others. You could export data sheets and pictures, right? Show you what that looks like real quick. I really thoroughly enjoy this. Oops, that's not the button I wanted. Okay. Why do we care about this? Well, we care about this because the end user wants to say, hey, what am I buying? Well, here's a 7-page data sheet on the Cisco 8811 phone. Okay? Like for you technical people, for the technical people at the organization, here you go, buddy, right? And by the way, you're the account manager, so maybe you don't have time to go search for data sheets. So Cisco's very nice. They provide that kind of thing for you. Here's just a picture of the 8811 in case you want to include it. Ooh, it's a very small picture. In case you want to include it in your proposal. As you know from watching the proposal video, I've already got pictures of this included in our proposal, but it's there. I mean, it's very nice of Cisco to provide it. But yeah, just a lot of really good literature here if you ever want to print this out. I mean, you could probably, between all these data sheets, you could probably print out 100 extra pages of data sheets to provide with a proposal, right? And so take that 12-page proposal, turn it into a 112-page proposal. The customer is either going to be really impressed or they're going to slap you. I would definitely make sure you understand what type of customer you're dealing with before you choose it, because it's not always going to default to impressed. So that's one of the cool exports. Another cool export is Cisco. So you see this export to CCW. What this does is it actually exports a file type that you really can't read. But when you go to file a deal registration, which there should be a video coming up on shortly, when you go to file a deal registration, all you have to do when it gets to the part where it's like, okay, tell us all the materials, all you have to do is go import save configuration, and you can select this file from your opportunity folder, and it'll import this entire bill of materials into CCW, save you a lot of extra work. So it's very, very nice. I'm a huge fan of that. What haven't I clicked? So Excel is very cool. Export to CCW is very cool. Export data sheets is very, very cool. Standard printout will just print out this bill of materials, which is okay. Export to Quozel and QuoteWorks could be / will be cool when we move to using Quozel. And by the time you watch this, we might already be using Quozel. So if you're watching it and we're using Quozel, then this is cool. If you're watching this and we're not using Quozel, then it could be cool. So those three I really, really like. Just for hilarity's sake, let's click on customer proposal. This will let you upload the client logo. Let me do this real quick, and let's put a picture of Fluffy, the Destroyer of Worlds, just so you see where the client logo goes. We'll put the net price in. It'll be in English, and this document template includes images that can be replaced. You can obtain new images from Cisco Partner Marketing. Suggested image size is blah, blah, blah. As the end user agreement specifies, the output of a QPT must always be confirmed and validated. So basically, they're not accepting responsibility for this being a quote from you to the end user, which I think is appropriate. And quite frankly, you shouldn't. Like I said, you should not use it as such. However, it could be worth something. All right. So this is an interesting proposal. I don't know where this picture came from, but it's definitely about how we're super connecting the world, right? Like, woo, lasers and crap. It's got our name here, which is okay. This looks like it would fill in client information from that client summary page. Here's the logo, Fluffy Destroyer of Worlds. This is actually some cool documentation I might steal for our proposal template, because it doesn't look like it's actually dynamic. This looks like it's pretty... It does look like it's pretty basic and not super dynamic. So yeah, it's probably worth stealing for all voice proposals. Um, but yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this proposal format. Customer case studies, customer testimonial. Wow, um, interesting. I wonder why they would make this in a format where we put things into it instead of it. I don't know. Long story short, it's got some good pictures, and you're probably sick of watching this because it's an hour and 10 minutes long at this point. So let's scroll through it as fast as humanly possible. I do think some of these are very cool, so we might steal this and reformat it, but getting down to the dynamic part, you can see here's the bill of materials, right? And it formats it very nicely. I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty nice format. So, but definitely don't use it. We still want to try to use our own formatting, which you should have already been trained on. So definitely some things that are worth stealing. And at the end of the day, I may edit out this entire portion of the video because I don't want this to drone on any longer than it has to. But if it's still there, then I guess I haven't gotten around to it. So you're very, very lucky. You get to hear me just yabber. Okay, so those are the exports. Again, really, really like export to Excel, export to CCW, data sheets, and I guess this could be useful as well. This may be useful someday. So that's it. Now all you have to do is take that hard work that you did, put it into CCW, get yourself some discounts for your deal registration, put it into our Excel spreadsheet so you can quote it to the customer. That's where you're going to put in all your labor and do stuff like that. Because if you thought the hardware was expensive, wait till you start putting in labor for a phone system, and go from there. And that's it. I think that'll wrap up this video. We'll go on to a mock voice opportunity for you to work through, and you'll get to do this firsthand. So appreciate it. Stay tuned for the next video.